Alright, so everything's got the initial coat of primer on here, and it's all in gray, and it's pretty well coated, but not super well. I mean, it's not super even coverage of everything, because right now, like I said, I'm just trying to find any mistakes, anything that needs a little bit more sanding, anything that needs to be like rescribed or anything, any of the details that maybe got sanded a little too much or something. And so far, just initially, just as I was doing all the painting, I could see there was a couple areas I need to touch up, but overall it's looking pretty good, so not a whole lot of cleanup that needs to be done. In the next round of primer is going to be like the actual primer round, and not everything will be in gray. Actually, probably only like the frame joint kind of parts will be in gray. For the most part, everything else will be primed in white, because the armor is white, red, yellow, so I guess like maybe the blue, maybe I'll use some gray primer on that. But anyway, everything's all gray now, but in the next round of primer I'll use probably mostly white primer over this. You guys can see how that detail is looking, and it looks looking pretty good. You can see there's a little bit on there that needs to be sanded, that little kind of ding in there. I'm not sure exactly what that's from, but a little bit of sanding and or putty filling. If there's any bits that need to be filled as well, I'll also just use a little bit of super glue to fill little parts here that need to be, like that one for example. But again, yeah, for the most part everything looks pretty good, so I'm gonna go ahead and get everything cleaned up, and then we'll move on to the actual primer stage, or the full primer stage. Alright guys, everything's all cleaned up, and the final round of primer is on everything, so just everything is primed in white now, and it's time to start on the actual painting. So for the white, I'm going to be using, the main color is just going to be Mr. Color number 69 Off-White. There you go, you can see that. And then for the secondary, like kind of white accent color, I'm going to be using number 315. This is gray FS16440. It is the US Navy F14 color, I guess, so for that. So for the yellow, I'm going to be using character yellow, my go-to choice for yellow colors. And then for the red and the blue, it's a little bit more complicated, as I can't decide between these different colors. So I'm going to do some tests. So basically for the red, I'm either between number 114, which is RLM red, number 108, which is character red, and number 68, which is red matter. Now I'm not sure which of those I'll end up going with. We'll do some tests. And then for the blue, I'm between number 80 Cobalt Blue. This is a Gundam color, number 14 MS Light Blue, which I think is probably going to be too light, but it could look kind of cool, so I'm going to test it out and see. And then number 65 Bright Blue, and I'm interested to see what exactly is going to be the difference. The Bright Blue definitely looks darker than the Cobalt Blue, so I think Cobalt Blue is probably going to be the way I'm going to go, but I'm going to test these and see. This one looks like it's probably too dark, this one looks like it's probably too light, and the reds look very similar, so I'm gonna test those out and we'll see which ones I end up going with. So let's head over and sort it out. So for the yellow, I ended up using character yellow with a little bit of the off-white mixed in with it, and I thought that was gonna be looking alright, but then later on after looking at it, it was still just too straight up yellow for me. Even though character yellow is slightly orange, I wanted it to be a little bit more orange, so I did end up going in later, going over with a second coat of character yellow with a little bit of fluorescent orange mixed in with it, which is my usual mixture for making something yellow, which I should have just stuck with from the start, but I did end up changing that up a little bit later on. And then for the blue and red, I actually decided not to do tests on them and just go with my instincts, and I could make adjustments if I needed to, and I did end up having to make some adjustments. Now for the blue here, I started off with using the Mr. Color Cobalt Blue, and once again a little bit of the off-white mixed in with that just to desaturate that a little bit, make it not so bright blue, but it was still pretty bright. Once I got everything painted and I spent a couple days looking at the parts, thinking about it more, it was just still way too bright blue for my taste on that, and so I then ended up later on going over it again with a Mr. Color number 72 intermediate blue. I just thinned that down quite a bit and just did like a light misting of the intermediate blue, because that's a really quite drastic different color from the cobalt blue, so I didn't want to change it too much, but I wanted to just kind of tone it down a little bit, so just misted it over with that intermediate blue, and that ended up looking much better in the end. And then in the case of the red color, I just ended up going with straight up character red for that, and I think that'll work out just fine. So just for doing the base color painting, I did have to mask a couple of pieces, like this piece here for the chest, and then also the front skirt pieces and back skirt pieces. I had to do a little bit of masking on those, which came out fine. There's still a lot more masking still yet to do for a lot of the gray details and the two-tone white that I'm going to be doing on the armor, as you can see like here on the manual. So like this piece here on the top of the foot, you can see the little top part is supposed to be in gray, so I'll have to mask that for making that the same color as the inner frame. And then up here on the shoulder, the same thing as well too. That detail up around the top of the shoulder needs to be masked and painted in the inner frame color as well. So while there were quite a lot of pieces that I had to mask for these little gray sections to paint, and it took a little while, but honestly it wasn't that bad because most of the shapes are pretty like just blocky shapes. You didn't have a lot of like curved lines and intricate details and things like that. They were pretty easy pieces to mask, which is great for me because I'm someone who doesn't like masking and I try to avoid it as much as possible, but for most of these pieces it was just much better to mask them, and luckily the masking process was pretty easy on them because yeah. So there's all the big first round of masking done for all of the dark colored frame color parts. So I did paint all the frame parts all at the same time, so that just kind of made it a little bit easier. So here, for example, let's take a look at peeling up some tape to see how I did. Hopefully no big mistakes on these, but you know, the mistake can happen. So, but like I said, these shapes were all pretty easy to mask, so it should be fine. Hopefully I didn't mess anything up. I also have to be careful because I'm using my metal tweezers to take off this tape, and if I scratch the part, then that'll just scratch the paint really easily with these really sharp metal tweezers. So having to be very gentle with it, but this looks like it's coming out pretty good. So at least that's one part down and it looks alright. So I'm gonna move on and get the rest of the tape off all these parts, and hopefully there's nothing to fix, but if there's something to fix, then I'll have to deal with that. But that is going to be it for this video. I just wanted to cover basically the base painting, and so there'll be one more work in progress video that will just cover the detail work, basically just the panel lining, a little bit more detail painting on it just by hand, and then some decals and top coat. And then one very last step too will also be an effect ring for it, so hopefully that's here in the near future. I'm just waiting for that in the mail, and then hopefully I'll be able to show that to you guys in the next work in progress video. But until then, guys, thank you so much for watching. Like the video, subscribe to let me know you enjoyed this video, and then I'll see you all in the next one. Bye bye.